I'm in Chicago to visit my friend Chris. Chris is one of the best performers in the country. He's a mentalist. I met Chris when I was a college student. He came through on his college tour, performed at the school where I was studying. And it was the week before finals week. He had 300 tired, jaded 19-year-olds. And just, I'll never forget it. We gave him 2 standing ovations, one in the middle and then one at the end. You know, in my business, there are some people who are good at inventing and other people who are good at performing. And once in a while, there are people who are good at both things. And Chris is definitely one of those people. Pisses me off a little, actually.
The best thing that can happen to any performer, in my opinion, is getting booed off stage. It's the single best thing that can happen. And yes, it has happened to me.
Tell me about it.
I was performing at a college. They wanted me to do hypnosis for their Midnight Madness basketball event.
Sounds like a winner.
Exactly. It's an enormous field house, and I know you've performed in field houses, so you know that the acoustics suck, right? I mean, and so there's a third of the audience that can understand me, a third of the audience that can maybe understand half of it, and a third of the audience has absolutely no idea what the hell I'm saying. And I've got 25 minutes to hypnotize people, make them do stupid stuff on stage and move on, right? And I come out, and 5 minutes into this upper third's going, boo, boo, and I'm going, just shut up for a minute and let me do my thing. Trust me, it's going to get better. And boo, boo. And I realize, okay, what happens? These people hate me. Right. They think I'm ruining all their fun. I'm the worst person in the world for them for 25 minutes.
Right.
And that's it. As soon as that 25 minutes is done, the basketball players are going to come out. They're going to be cheering and screaming, and they're going to go, oh, that thing was kind of a waste of time, but this is great.
Right.
And who are they going to remember? Those guys. Are they going to remember me? Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. We are all afraid that when we do horrible, that everybody's going to think bad things about us forever, and they're going to think bad things about us until the show's over and they go home, and then they're going to replace us with other things, and we will no longer matter. Once you realize that it doesn't matter if the audience loves you, that your ego survives without it, then you can be authentic.
Right.
Because otherwise you're spending all your time people pleasing, and you can never be authentic when you're spending all your time. And that's an interesting paradox, because then you really can please people. You know, you'll never be good at pleasing people when you're worried, when your ego depends upon them. You can only really please them when your ego is no longer part of the process.
I once saw Bob Dylan play a concert, and he played the first half of the concert with his back to the audience.
I'm going to say there might be a difference between not needing the audience's approval and being utterly disdainful of the audience's approval.
That's fair, but it didn't feel disdainful. It felt like he cared so much about the music that he wasn't going to put on a show for us. Like, he was counting with the drummer. He was trying to get the sound right. And that really resonated with me, that here is a performer who's technically an entertainer, who could give a shit about entertaining the audience. He's trying to do his thing as well as he possibly can, and trusting that will resonate with an audience far more than trying to ingratiate himself.
Well, yeah, and I think that's exactly the same lesson we're talking about. You know, people will respond to you being in command of your craft. Ingratiating the audience is not necessarily part of that. You know, it's but you will be more confident once you're not worried about being loved anyway.
Yeah.
And then they will love you more.
Right. I remember my first year when I was touring, I was essentially the same age as the people in the audience, and I didn't know how
that's true. You were young.
know how to command the room. And some nights I could do it just by, trying to be intense, or and sometimes I was just a complete ass. Just trying to get, but you get better at it, and
you do get better at it. I think that most magicians have no idea how to enter a stage. And if you read what the vaudevillians would tell you, you have a spot, and you hit your mark, and you hold it. And I took that to heart. You know, you have to own the space. The space has to belong to you. And so, you know, for me, an entrance is you walk out, you hit the mark, and you own it. You stay there for enough time that the audience understands that you are in control. And once they understand you're in control, they'll give themselves over to you.
We met when you were on a college tour and you performed on my campus. And afterwards, I came up to you and asked, because I've been doing magic my whole life, and I said, how do you make a career out of this? And it would have been very easy for you to give a quick answer, because I since that moment, I've discovered how tired you are after
a show. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But instead, we spoke for 2 hours about how to make a living as a magician.
Yeah, and I do remember the conversation. It's funny, I don't remember the show very well, but I do remember the conversation. It's funny because when I first got started, and not really when I first got started, but when I really first started to make it in the college market, I would get somebody calling me minimum once a week going, how can I get into this? How can I do it? Everybody wanted or thought they wanted what I had. And early on, I was like, no, I'm not going to share anything. And after a while, I realized I don't want to be that guy. When I got started, I was helped, given guidance, and I thought it would be much better to share the true story of how one gets into this sort of thing with anybody who asked. And having said that, I mean, it's not like I spent 2 hours with everybody. I'm
glad to know that, frankly.
No, yeah, that's right. But I remember the conversation really well, and I think it's simply because you looked like you had the drive to do it. Because most people don't. You know, most people have this ridiculous idea of what they think it's going to be like, just, you know, glitz and glamour. And the college market, as you now know, is not remotely.
It's rugged.
It's rugged. Put it lightly. Exactly.
I think
it's rugged.
What I think many people don't understand, and what I didn't understand really before you and I had our talk, was that there's an entire ecosystem of magicians and mentalists who are not stars in the general public's eye, but who make a great living touring around doing shows. That it can be a job in the way that being a professional painter or professional photographer can be a job. Like you can be a professional magician and not be a headliner somewhere.
Exactly. There's a kind of journeyman class of people in the craft who will never be famous, who maybe dreamed of being famous, but for various reasons, luck, what have you, that's sort of out of the picture, but are living the lives that they want to live, and nobody outside of our little world will ever hear of them.
Right. Yeah, I think if more parents of young magicians knew that this job existed, they would be less terrified of their children going into magic.
Yeah, though, in the new world, they're probably less terrified anyway when you consider how insecure, quote unquote, real jobs are. I think of people who lost their jobs, never got them back in the 2009 recession. And I remember in the height of my college performing years, I was doing roughly 200 colleges a year. And you think, 200 people a year are not going to fire me at once. I think you actually have more job security in something like what we do than in most of the real jobs out there.
200 colleges a year is insane.
It was insane.
The most I ever did was like 110 or something like that, and I thought my world was going to end. I don't know what to say. That's crazy.
Well, I would be out on the road for 3 weeks. I remember my longest stretch was like 5 weeks out on the road. And it's a show pretty much every day, sometimes 2 shows a day. Maybe you'd have a Sunday off, but that would be it. And that part was just a blur. It still is a blur to me. There's about a 10-year period where I barely remember any of it.
Do you have any advice that you wish you'd known when
Yes,
you were
I do.
A teenager?
The single most important advice I can give, and it changed my life when I made this decision, only I didn't make it at the age of 13, I made it much, much later, is to never use a stock line or stock bit again. And I mean, I won't, but I can name for you performers of some note who will use jokes and gags and bits that are pretty stock. I don't remember what it was that motivated me to quit doing that. But at some point I realized I will never discover who I am as a performer if I do that. And a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't matter, the audience is entertained. Sure, that's true. But it does matter in the sense that you will never advance as an artist.
Right.
And the most important thing for any performer, in my opinion, is to find your own personal voice. When I'm looking at a performer, what I'm looking at is, do they have a point of view that I can understand, maybe relate to? But even if I can't relate to it, do they have a distinctive point of view? Because we do novelty entertainment, we're not commenting explicitly on the nature of the world, but your attitude toward your magic comes through, and that acts as a kind of commentary on the nature of the world. I can watch you on stage and know a little bit about who Nate is, and you have a very distinctive point of view, but a lot of performers never get that. You will never get that if you use a stock line. If you're stuck in the, if you believe in ESP, or if you believe in psychokinesis, raise my hand, you're perhaps entertaining the audience, but you're doing yourself an enormous disservice.
I'm interested to hear about your heroes and inspirations. Everyone sort of goes to their own place for rocket fuel.
Absolutely.
What's yours?
I guess my inspiration comes from science and scientists. I'm a science geek for sure, and I absolutely love reading about the latest discoveries or even conjectures in cosmology and particle physics, that sort of thing. I remember one time going to a Fermilab, which is an atom smasher. It's a particle accelerator, and they have on Sundays Meet the Scientist Day, and one of their scientists will come, and you can ask them any question you want, and so I've always been interested in that, just in the fact that, I wish I could tell you the cosmologist or astronomer who said this, but one of my favorite quotes is, "Not only is the universe stranger than you imagine, it's stranger than you can imagine."
Wow.
And so that, I find that very inspirational. That is a benchmark to create in the audience this feeling or awareness that the universe is stranger than you can imagine.